new European Textile Strategy. We are Evelien Lafont from Circular Flanders.
And I'm Simon. Hi, I'm Simon Grispert from Flanders, DC.
And we are the organizers of the webinar, and we will also be your moderators for today. We are very happy to welcome all of you because we received over 130 registrations. So clearly we have a hot topic planned for today. As you all know, a few weeks ago, the European Commission launched their long-awaited new European strategy for sustainable and circular textiles. So this policy will have a big impact on the fashion companies because it aims to create a greener and a more competitive sector by changing the rules for production and consumption of textiles. So in the webinar today, we want to filter out the most important and concrete proposals for fashion businesses. And as much as possible, we will give you an idea of the expected timing of these actions.
Indeed, and we have 3 speakers lined up. They'll tell us all about it in a few minutes. But first, we have some practical information. So during the webinar, you can react and share your ideas with the chat button that's on the bottom of your screen. And I would suggest maybe you can test it already right now. So if you want, you can share who you are and where you're from. I mean, which company you're from. Always interesting to know who else is participating. So please feel free to share that in the chat. But next to the chat button, or a bit further in your screen, you also have a Q&A button, and we will also be using that. That's important because that's where you can ask your questions to the speakers. We definitely invite you to do this during the whole webinar. And at the end of the webinar, we have some time foreseen to handle the questions there. And also, if you don't have your own questions, be sure to go and have a look from time to time, because you can see the questions of other people there and you can upvote them. So you can click and decide which questions you definitely want to be asked. So be sure to have a look there from time to time so we can all get the most out of this webinar. The speakers will be using slide decks. Somebody already asked it in the chat. We will be sharing those slide decks, and we will also be sharing the recording of the webinar. You will receive it afterwards via email, not directly. We will ask you to complete our evaluation survey, and if you do that, then you receive the slides and the recording of the webinar. All right, I think that's all for the practical information.
All right, so time to introduce our first speaker, my colleague Sophie Buckley here. Sophie is now the head of the International Policy Unit at OVAM, and OVAM is the Public Waste Agency of Flanders. There we strive for a more sustainable waste and materials management and a clean and healthy soil. And OVAM also aims for the transition to circular economy. Sophie will talk about the general framework and the implementation of the textile strategy, including the initiatives concerning due diligence and extended producer responsibility. Sophie, we are very pleased to have you here, and I shall give you the floor now.
Thank you, Evelyn, and good morning, everyone. Simon will share my slides. Thank you very much. So as said, on the 30th of March, the European Commission launched a sustainable product policy package, and the EU strategy for sustainable and circular textiles is part of that. You can show the next slide. I will first give you some background because textiles have been mentioned as a priority by this European Commission from the start. So in the first 100 days of this European Commission, they launched the European Green Deal that should help us to make the green and digital transition in the EU. And there it was already announced that textiles would be a priority. Next slide, please. And so both in the industry strategy, it was identified as a priority ecosystem, and also in the circular economy action plan, it was identified as a key value chain. So we already know for some time that the Commission wanted to take an initiative on textiles. The next slide, please. So this is, I think, a very helpful picture about what has been launched on the 30th of March, because it's really a package of several initiatives. And at the very core is the Eco-Design for Sustainable Products Regulation. And my colleague Berenice will talk about that later in more detail. And also an initiative regarding consumers will be dealt with later on. But so you can see that in this package that relates to sustainable products, there's two specific sectors that have a separate initiative. One is on the construction sector, but the other one is on textiles. And that is this strategy for sustainable and circular textiles. Next slide, please. Why an EU textile strategy? Well, the European consumption of textiles has the fourth highest impact on the environment and climate change. So first you have food, housing and mobility, but after that, textile consumption in the EU has a very big impact on the environment. And it's also one of the top 3 pressures on water and land use, and a top 5 in terms of raw material use and greenhouse gas emissions. So there's several challenges, environmental challenges linked to our consumption of textiles. But not only this environmental aspect makes that textile value chain is a priority for a Commission, but also because the Commission sees an opportunity for employment within the EU and sees opportunities there. You can show the next slide. All this information, because I see already a question about the source of the figures. All this information comes from what is mentioned in the strategy itself, or background documents from the European Commission. And so in these documents, you can also find the source and some explanation about these figures. This is a slide from the European Commission that also explains why the Commission sees a need for action, and that relates to environmental impact, but also the need to have more recycling of discarded textiles, and also to, well, basically the idea that so many more textiles are now produced than in the past, that the impact is only becoming bigger and bigger. The idea is to increase the EU's textile ecosystem resilience and boost its attractiveness and innovative potential. And so there's really this idea that we have to move to sustainable textiles. Please, next slide.
Sophie, can I just ask, we hear some noise a bit. I don't know if you're a bit closer to your microphone than before the webinar started, or has something changed?
Okay, I will try again. Do you
like
still hear?
Ruis, I don't know in English. It's
okay.
Yeah, or
I will
something
be a bit
scratching on the microphone.
further away from my screen then. I hope it helps. I also think that not the full slide is visible now, but I will try to explain. What is key in this strategy, and I will explain that the strategy is not a legislative proposal. So it's not something that the Commission proposes now as being legislation. It's more, it's a communication, and that means it's a kind of action plan in which the European Commission announces all the initiatives it will take or is already taking regarding textiles. Important to know is that in this list of activities that you will find in the annex of the document, and which I will also explain later, we see initiatives that are already going on. They are already being negotiated right now. And we see new initiatives. We also see initiatives that are more horizontal and also apply to textiles, but not only to textiles, but also to other products. And we also see initiatives that are very specific only for textiles. And I will explain that a bit later concretely, but so it's you should see it as a kind of listing of all the things the European Commission wants to do between now and the end of this commission, so in 2024, regarding textiles. And in the strategy, the Commission explains its vision for textiles by 2030. So with all these initiatives, what does the Commission want to achieve? And it wants to achieve that by 2030, all textile products placed on the EU markets are durable, repairable, and recyclable, that they are to a great extent made of recycled fibers, and that they are free of hazardous substances. And also that when they are produced, social rights are respected. In English, the line is in the strategy, they want to have fast fashion out of fashion. And the Commission wants that consumers will benefit longer from high quality textiles. Another aspect that is also important for the European Commission is that reuse and repair services will be widely available and profitable. And they also want that the textile sector will be competitive, resilient, and innovative, and that producers will take responsibility for their products along the value chain. The idea is that now that not throwaway clothes will become the norm, but circular clothes, and that there will be sufficient capacity also within the EU for reuse, recycling, and that there will be less incineration and landfilling of textiles. Regarding this vision, we have a question to you as an audience, and for that, Simon will will explain how the poll works.
Indeed, we have a short poll to share. I will launch it right now. So we have multiple options that you can check. The question is, which aspect of the Vision 2030 for textiles do you think is most feasible to achieve by 2030? You should know it's allowed to check more than one answer, and we have a lot of options here. So first one is textile products are durable, repairable, and recyclable. That's one option. Textile products are to a great extent made of recycled fibers, which is also an option. Textile products are free of hazardous substances. Textile products are produced respecting social rights. Consumers benefit longer from high quality textiles. Profitable reuse and repair services are widely available. Producers take responsibility for their products along the value chain. Circular rather than throwaway clothes have become the norm, and sufficient capacities for recycling and minimal incineration and landfilling. A lot of options. Can be difficult to make your choices, but know that you can check more than one answer. And we're going to give you a few seconds more to make your choices. So then afterwards we can share the results. I can see a lot of choices coming in already, so I think we don't need that much more time. Just going to give you 10 more seconds. Still people are making choices, but it's starting to end. So I think we can end the poll right now. I will do that. And now I can share the results. I hope everyone can see them now. I can see, well, all options have been chosen. Most people have checked textile products are produced respecting social rights. 46%. Profitable reuse and repair services are widely available, also 46%. And then the first option, textile products are durable, repairable, and recyclable. Those seem to be the most checked options. Sophie, can you also see the options or the results?
Yes, I can see the results.
Okay, great. Then I will give you back the word.
Yeah, thank you. It's interesting to see that there's not, I mean, some options score a bit higher, but it's not that we have like one thing that is completely seen as not possible and another thing that is seen as the only thing possible. So that's actually interesting to see as feedback from this group. And you can show the next slides. Okay, so so in this strategy, when you have a look at it, you will see a long list of initiatives that you will see a long list of initiatives that the European Commission is already taking or plans to take. And they are structured along some topics. First is that some of the initiatives actually fall under the Eco-Design for Sustainable Products Regulation, which my colleague Berenice will explain later today in more detail. And it means that a couple of things that are decided in this regulation will also apply for textiles. For example, when we look at product design and transparency, there will be in the future, or at least that's a proposal from the Commission, there will be mandatory performance requirements regarding the sustainability of textile products. The aim is, if that is mandatory and it's in the whole of the EU, it will also become easier to all achieve these minimum requirements, minimum performance requirements. And the idea is then that products that do not live up to these requirements will be banned from the EU market. There's also the idea proposed of a digital product passport, which will contain information requirements on the environmental sustainability of textiles. The idea here is that with such a passport, it will be possible for different actors along the value chain to have access to relevant information, and it can be different for different actors. For example, a producer will need different information regarding its raw materials than, for example, a recycling facility, but they will all have access to the necessary information for their activities. And also for the consumer, which more information will be available. And then the idea is to also have mandatory requirements concerning green public procurement. So when public services buy textiles, then there will be mandatory requirements. You can show the next slides, because also under this eco-design regulation, there is a proposal from the Commission to do something about the destruction of unsold goods. I think particularly for textiles, this has received lots of media attention in the past year, namely that unsold or returned goods from online sales were destroyed. And so the Commission wants to do something about that. And what they propose is a kind of two-step approach. The first step that they want to take is a transparency obligation for large companies. But of course, in this textile value chain, it might be that this also trickles down to smaller companies, because you are interacting with these large companies. What will they need to publicly disclose? So that can be on the website, for example. It's the number of products that they discard and destroy. And that also relates to textiles, also to other products. And information about the treatment in terms of preparing for reuse, recycling, incineration, or landfilling. So actually, what the Commission wants to know is how big is this challenge, because it received a lot of attention, but actually we don't know yet how big the challenge is. So that's the first step, this transparency obligation. Once the Commission has this information available, it can analyze for which products there is a problem. And for the products where there is a problem, so where there's way too much destruction of unsold goods, the Commission will see whether it will introduce a ban on the destruction of unsold or returned textile products. I mentioned textile products because the Commission already indicates that it's looking at textiles particularly among some others, but it will be based on the numbers that they will see. Next slide, please. Then there are some other actions that relate to sustainable production and consumption. There's a cluster of initiatives that links to product design and transparency. The Commission wants to ensure the reliability of green claims, meaning there will be different initiatives regarding that. So the Commission wants to ensure that when a consumer or a business buys textile products, it can rely on the green claims that are made. And that means that the Commission will take an initiative that shows which green claims you can or cannot make. And it will take an initiative. To substantive, so to harmonize how you make these green claims, so that it's the same for the whole of EU, and so that you, as a consumer or a business, you don't have to study a lot. But if you see a green claim, that you're sure that it is correct. It will also have a look at already existing labeling regulation and see whether it has to be reviewed. Right now, this mainly relates to, for example, material compositions that you have to mention on the label of a textile product, but it might be extended. And if it's extended, you don't want this huge label on your clothes, for example. It will consider whether a digital label is possible. There already exist EU eco-label criteria, but they will also be reviewed. I always indicated the announced timing of all these initiatives. It will be reviewed because the Commission hopes that then also more producers will make use of this criteria. And then something that is already going on is identifying product environmental footprints category rules for apparel and footwear, and the Commission announced that it will be finished by 2024. This should help to assess the environmental impact of apparel and footwear. Next slide, please. Then there's also some activities or initiatives that relate to the addressing of the impacts. Later on this year, we expect a legislative initiative regarding the unintentional release of microplastics. This does not only relate to textile products, also to tires, for example, but textile products is one of the focus products. And the Commission also wants to address the production processes of textiles, and this really fits in the zero pollution agenda. And then, as mentioned before, due diligence is also very relative for the textile sector. At this moment, there is negotiations going on regarding this directive. What is the idea? The idea is that large companies have to identify their risks, so both social and environmental risks. They have to assess them, so which risks will they address first? And then they will have to act for change, evaluate that, and report and communicate about this. So this is a general directive. It does not only apply to the textile sector, but of course it will also be applicable for the textile sector. And this is currently under negotiation. So we will see when, what the final text will be. Next slide, please. And then there's some initiatives that relate to the waste challenges. The Commission has announced harmonized EPR requirements. So that means EPR means extended producer responsibility. It's a policy approach that is already used for several waste streams. And with this approach, producers are given responsibility for the treatment or disposal of post-consumer products. And the idea is that it's an economic instrument, and the idea is that this would help to prevent waste at source and promote eco-design of textiles, for example, or other products. Sorry. It's not clear yet whether what form this will take. These harmonized requirements, whether it will be guidance for all the member states regarding how to set up an EPR scheme for textiles, because currently only France has one, Netherlands is working on it, and also Sweden is investigating one. But it's not yet a common practice to have an EPR scheme for textiles. So either it's guidance regarding how do you set it up, or it really will be something that is mentioned in the Waste Framework Directive, and it will be revised, and then all member states have to set up an EPR scheme. What is already an obligation as of the 1st of January of 2025 is that all EU member states have to set up separate collection for textiles, which is also not yet the case today. And EPR can then also help to finance this, because you have to set up a system to collect the textiles, to sort them, and then to find good ways of reuse and recycling. So in this area, the combination is often made between separate collection and then an EPR scheme. Next slide, please. Another initiative that relates to the waste challenges is that the Commission will conduct study work already in 2022 regarding checking whether it's feasible to set targets regarding preparing for reuse and recycling. So that's study work that is going on. And currently there's negotiations going on regarding the export of waste in general. And so the new rules that will be applicable will also be relevant for textile waste. And the European Commission wants to have a clearer distinction between the export of second-hand textile products and textile waste. Next slide, please. And then there's a broad set of initiatives that all fall under the category enabling the transition. It relates to different things, for example, how the Commission will support research and innovation, or what kind of guidance the Commission wants to propose regarding, for example, circular economy business models. These are all a bit, I would say, softer. It's not a legislative proposal that is coming up. But one, and Simon, you can show the next slide very briefly, because that's a further list of action. And of course, market surveillance will be very much key, because if you set requirements for all the products or textile products that enter the EU market, you will also need this surveillance to see whether all the products comply. But I wanted to attract your attention to one initiative, which you can see on the next slide, and that's Refashion Now. Refashion Now will be a pan-European campaign, and the idea is that it should be common that fast fashion is out of fashion. The Commission wants to raise public awareness regarding the challenges of the textile sector, but also about resource use and textiles. It wants to identify practical solutions for several of these challenges, and it wants to involve youth and actually set up a kind of movement. And I think that's interesting for you. The idea is to redefine fashion, and their designers and brands and consumers, they can actually all contribute to this idea of refashion now. So that's my last slide. I think I used up all the time I have available. And after all the other presentations, I can come back to questions. Thank you. I will also share in the chat the link to all the documents, so the strategy itself with its annex, but also the Commission has published interesting press articles and fact sheets and so on that make all this information digestible. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie, for this clear overview. I want to apologize a little bit for the noise on the line. Strange, we tested before, but anyway, I hope for the next speakers we won't have that problem. I want to repeat that all questions can be asked in the chat or in the Q&A, and that we will manage all these questions after all the speakers has done their presentations. So please, all your thoughts, put them in the chat, and we are happy to have your questions. So over to our next speaker, Bérénice Huet. She works at the Federal Public Service Health, Food, Chain Safety and Environment, and more specific in the product policy team at the Directorate General for the Environment. Bérénice will go into more detail on the strategy with regard to the new eco-design requirements. So Bérénice, if you are there, I will give you the floor now.
Yeah, thank you, Evelyn, and good morning to everyone. So, okay, as Evelyn just said, I will talk to you more specifically on new eco-design requirements. So my presentation is, okay, so I hope you see the presentation.
Yes, perfect.
So the first slide is an overview of the requirements for sustainable and circular textiles. So Sophie already explained it to you, and I will focus on the mandatory eco-design requirements and the digital product passport. There are different ways to improve environmental performance of textiles, and one of it is to extend the life of textile products in order to use clothes for longer. And so product design has a key role here, and the quality of the product, of course. And with higher quality, consumers, so we use their clothes for longer, and it means less textiles discard. And at the same time, if we increase durability of textile, it supports circular business model, such as reuse, renting, repair, take-back service, and second-hand retail. And consequently, in the EU strategy for textile, the Commission will develop eco-design requirement to increase textile performance and in terms of durability, reusability, and repairability. Another way to improve the environmental performance of textiles is also to have a look at the material compositions. So the fiber used have an impact on the recycling of textile waste, the blending of fibers also, because if there are blending of fibers, it's more difficult for the recyclability because you need specific technology to separate the different fibers. And also the presence of chemicals of concern is an issue because it will contaminate the stream. So the material composition is really key to improve the recyclability of textile waste. And today, less than 1% of textile waste is recycled into new textiles. So, okay, we see we can really improve here. And 20% of textile waste is used in industry wipes, for example, or other applications. And so the EU Commission, so under the Eco-Design for Sustainable Product Regulation, will develop here also eco-design requirements, so to improve performance of textile in terms of fiber-to-fiber recyclability, mandatory recycled fiber content, and also to minimize and track the presence of substance of concern. Okay, then here, indeed, we notice there is a lack of information about environmental characteristics of textile products. And in order to help consumers make better choice and also improve communication between actors along the supply chains, the Commission will introduce a digital product passport for textiles, and it is based on mandatory information requirement and circularity, environmental impact, sustainability, substances of concern, okay, all environmental aspects. And when preparing the eco-design requirements, Commission shall also take into account green public requirements and public procurements, and the scope will be defined by the Commission following an impact assessment, and also requirements regarding member state incentives. But okay, the Commission will also take into account this. And as Sophie already explained to you, the Commission will prioritize a product with the highest potential impacts in terms of environmental sustainability. And the initial assessment of the Commission shows that this should include, for example, personal textiles, as household textiles, carpets, mattresses. So a priority for the Commission is really the textiles. Okay, so this was my last slide. So, okay, I thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you very much, Berenice. You can stop the slide share. Perfect already. Then it's time for our last speaker. Just maybe to remember everyone, you can still ask your questions in the Q&A part. I see some people already have done that. You can also upvote questions that you think are very interesting over there. Over to our next and last speaker, that's Davie Davids. Yeah, Davie is working as an inspector auditor for the Belgian Economic Inspectorate within the Internet Surveillance Unit, and there he monitors and he enforces the economic law code, and more specific relating to consumer rights on the internet, which I think is very interesting and very relevant for all of us, because among other things, he is a person that analyzes merchants or companies' websites to verify if they are not guilty of unfair commercial practices. And since 2021, since last year, this also includes a focus on greenwashing. So I know that some of you are very aware of this because we have heard quite some Belgian fashion companies that have been audited the past few months. So this is sounds very relevant to me to know how they work and also to know how they look at greenwashing. So Davie will talk about this. He will talk about the expected new European regulations on greenwashing. But we also asked him to tell a bit about these inspections that are happening. I'm quite sure this will be interesting too for all of you. Okay, Davie, you can share your screen. I see you're already doing that. Great. And then the word and the floor is yours.
Good morning to everyone.
The screen isn't in presentation mode yet.
Not yet now either?
No.
Okay, I will do it in another way then.
Yes, now it is.
Okay, so good morning to everyone. I'm present here with my colleague, Inspector Maite Caseiro-Diegues, who will be able to answer any questions in French if that is needed. Now, as an introductory, I want to say that our Ministry of Economy is very aware that the green transition is something that is very alive in the minds of consumers, but also in the minds of companies. Companies use the information about the environmental impact of their products and services in their marketing campaign. And that is good news. It's good that companies inform consumers in a way that they are made able to choose for those products that have the least impact on the environment. But of course, there is one condition, namely that information has to be reliable, that it is truthful, that it is clear, not exaggerated, and that it is based on robust proof. Because if that's not the case, then we enter into the greenwashing practices that are unfair commercial practices and therefore a violation of the economic law that can be sanctioned. Now, what does our services do to tackle greenwashing practices? Well, it focuses on two pillars. Namely, it has, first of all, published guidelines in order to help companies to prevent greenwashing practices by summing up all bad practices that they should avoid and by suggesting good practices. And our second pillar is that what Maite and I do, namely doing investigations and enforcing the rules of our Code of Economic Law if there are any greenwashing practices going on. Now, as our first slide, I show you some figures, but we don't have the time to discuss all of them. But I only want to point out those first figures. As you can see, in 2020, the European Commission discovered that there were more than 230 eco-labels already used within the EU alone, which is, of course, a lot. And for the consumer, not so good news in a way that the more eco-labels going around, the more difficult it will be for consumers. They are very confused. They are not to be expected to know anymore each and every label that is on the market. Let's stand that they know where those labels stand for, what are the criteria that those labels use to assess products or product processes. So if I can give an advice to the companies of today, that is to use only those labels that are widely recognized and widely known also by the consumer. And if it's not the case, then to choose labels that are at least trustful and provide some information about the label if it's not a known label. So tell about what the label exactly means and what the criteria are that those labels use in order to assess products. So we talked today about green claims, but what are green claims? There is no legal act that defines what a green claim is, but there is a common understanding that it's the practice of giving the impression that a good or service from a company has a positive impact on the environment or has no impact on the environment, or is less damaging to the environment in comparison to competing goods and services, or in comparison to goods and services that were previously put on the market by that same company. So green claims or environmental claims, it talks a bit about the environment, and we look at the environment in a very broad way. So it can concern the air, water, ecosystems, biodiversity, and so on. And by claims, we mean literally each sort of claims that you can find on billboards, on social media pages of companies, on the web shop, on the packaging. And that can include not only words and sentences, but also visuals or logos, illustrations, even brand names can be a green claim. When you see, for instance, some products have a name with the prefix eco, that gives the impression to the consumer that there is an economic benefit connected to that product. So all those things can be considered as green claims. Now, you also see a lot talking about sustainability. So what is the difference between sustainability and environment, for instance? Well, sustainability goes even wider. It is a much broader term than environment. It comprehends the environment, but also other stuff that they are more on an ethical level, as for instance, animal welfare, or the payment of fair wages to production workers, which is a very important issue in the textile sector, or the working conditions, also something very important within the fashion industry. All those claims, they fall under the sustainability claims, and we assess such claims in the same way as we do the environmental or the green claims. So as there is no definition of green claims, there is also not a legal definition of greenwashing. But in short, we can conclude that greenwashing is the practice of misleading consumers by claiming that a product or a service, or even the trader, is better for the environment than in reality is. And how can one commit greenwashing practice? Well, we will see it in the next slides, where the bad practices are summed up. So how do we tackle greenwashing practices? Well, we can base ourselves on legislation, of course. For certain products, there are specific rules applicable. For instance, for the tires or for certain electronic devices, there is the eco-design rules, which implies also that there is an energy efficiency label that has to be shown to consumers in order for them to compare very easily products on the base of their energy efficiency. But for most products, we have to fall back on our general legislation. That is legislation that is based in the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive, so on a European level, but it is transposed in every European country in their own national legislation, so it is applicable in the same way within the whole European Union. Now, if we detect greenwashing practices, then it's 9 out of 10, it is a violation of the 4 dispositions that you can see here on the slide. So it can be a misleading consumers about the existence or nature of the product. If I, as a trader, proclaim that my product is fully recyclable, then I say something about the nature of the product. If it isn't completely true, well, then I'm committing a greenwashing practice. The same goes for misleading about the main characteristics of a product. If I say that my product doesn't contain any harmful substances for the environment, then I say something about the main characteristics of a product. But it's not only, green claims are not only about products or services, but can say also something about the characteristics of the trader, him or herself. If a trader says that it transports their packages in an ecological way, then it says something about himself, about the things they do for the environment. Also, some sustainable goals for the future, for instance, are characteristics that reflect on the trader himself. So also there are possible greenwashing practices going on when the information is not fully correct or exaggerated. And then a last one is what we call misleading omission. That is the practice that implies that a trader doesn't give the information to really determine what the real ecological benefit of a product is, for instance, or the information is present, but it is hidden. For instance, if I have a website and I put a claim on that website, but the explanation of that claim is hard to find. You have to click 3-4 times in order to get the real information. Then we can talk about misleading omission as well. An example of misleading omission is a company that sells a washing machine, for instance, with the ad that says that it consumes 30% less electricity than the previous model. But it forgets to mention that it is only valid when you press the eco button. Then that forgotten information is a form of misleading omission, and thus also a form of greenwashing. Now, our Belgian guidance, a link to the Belgian guidance is provided further in the presentation that will be sent around, so you can easily check it for the full information. I will briefly say what is in the guidance. It sums up 10 indicators of greenwashing. I will shortly go through them. So it contains all sorts of practices that can indicate that there is a greenwashing going on. The first two, that is evident, that is very obvious, of course. Traders shouldn't give unreliable information or even lie about the ecological benefit that they proclaim. If you do that, well, of course, that is greenwashing. What is also not allowed is to exaggerate. You have to be, your claim has to be balanced. So if you proclaim an ecological benefit, make sure it is very precise. If you say that your product is made out of recycled material and it is not fully recycled material, well, then you have to say that it is that much percentage. You have to be very precise, otherwise it could be perceived as being an exaggerating claim. And then the fourth one is a very important one, is something that we as inspection see a lot. That is the use of vague general claims as green or good for the planet, sustainable, eco. Those terms, they easily mislead consumers because a consumer doesn't know what those words mean. So we advise companies to always be very, very precise if they want to stress out a certain benefit. Then the fifth one is what I already explained as being a misleading omission. So the claim is not explained, or the information is very much hidden, is not put near the claim. That can be a form of greenwashing. And as already previously said, not only words or sentences can be a misleading practice, but also the use of visuals can be misleading. As you can see that example there, by just putting that visual, a consumer doesn't know what now is exactly the ecological benefit of a product. So you have to be very careful when you use visuals and make sure that there is a good and precise explanation put near to that visual in order for consumers not to be misled. Another example of greenwashing is the use of self-fabricated or fake labels, especially when the labels are constructed in such a way that it resembles real registered labels of independent bodies. We had a case of use of a palm oil free label that really looked like the label that was used by an external independent institution where that label was really registered. So as you can see, it was a palm oil free label. The similar label was also a round label with a black frame stating 100% palm oil free, and with even an orangutan in the middle of it in black and white. Not a picture as it was on the real label, but a drawing. But it really resembled very much the label. So it could give the impression that that certain product was indeed certified by an external body when it was not the case. An eighth example of greenwashing is the focus on irrelevant action. For instance, when I make an ad about a product and there is a voice saying that the company has installed solar panels and that for the rest it uses only 100% green electricity, etc. It says a lot about the company, but it doesn't say anything about the product, while it is the product that is being advertised. So if you want to say something about your company, it is really important that you put that information separately from, for instance, a product page, but put it maybe under on a web page that talks about the corporate responsibility, for instance. And then a ninth indicator of greenwashing is what we call a false exclusivity. So that means that the company makes it appear as if that environmental claim is uniquely linked to that company, while in fact it is already required by law or already a common practice in the sector. In the cosmetic sector, for instance, we can find examples of claims that state that the product is CFK free, but that is already forbidden since the late 80s. Also, the testing on animals is not allowed for cosmetics anymore on a European level. So claims about that can be misleading because it can give the impression that that particular company doesn't test their products or ingredients on animals, while it is already forbidden for the whole sector. And then last but not least, if a company makes a claim, it has to have the proof that that claim is real, that it is not exaggerated. And if we ask a proof from the company, we don't accept just any proof or declarations. Now we want a robust proof of that is independent, that is verifiable, and that is based on the latest scientific findings. Or as I'm sorry, I'm a bit of an astronomy geek. Geeks like me know Carl Sagan. He was a famous astronomer and used some famous one-liners, and one of them is extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that is certainly applicable when you use green claims. So I talked about the things you shouldn't do, but what should you do then? In the guidance, it is explained more in detail, but it comes down to this. Claims must be true, correct, must be presented in a clear and precise way, must be proportional, so balanced, relevant, and complete, and they have to be justified, verifiable, and proven. So here you can find the links to our Belgian guidance, but there is also a guidance on European level. It's very interesting to read, so I suggest every participant to look at those guidances. I find them very, very helpful. They contain examples, it's a really good thing to do. Now, what brings the future? So Sophie and Berenice, they explained a bit about their topics, about interesting things to come. As it comes to green claims or greenwashing, what brings the future? Well, actually not that much. There are 2 amendments proposed with new rules, but actually those new rules are not as new as you might expect. The first amendment is about the Consumer Rights Directive, where the proposition is that traders should provide some extra information to consumers, amongst others, the durability. Namely, consumers should be informed about the guaranteed durability of products if it's more than 2 years, but because there is already a legal warranty of 2 years anyways. But in fact, it comes down to a commercial guarantee. And if there is a commercial guarantee, then traders are already now obliged to give that information to consumers. So in that way, that new rule doesn't appear to be so much new. What could be new, on the other hand, is the obligation to provide information on repairs. The Commission is thinking about giving products a repairability score. You can see between brackets where applicable, because it's not sure that every sector will have a mandatory repairability score to place and how it should be calculated. So it is very premature to already talk about it as being a given that will be obligatory in the future, but it is something to watch out for. The second amendment, it concerns the Unfair Commercial Practices Directive. So that is really about the greenwashing practices. But everything you see on that slide can already be enforced and sanctioned by the rules that we have today. The only difference, or the main difference, is that certain greenwashing practices will be explicitly put in that directive. But we can already sanction them by the general rules that are applicable today. And then I am already on my last slide, or maybe I am a bit behind schedule. But I was asked to talk as well about the investigations that we do more in concrete. So how do we assess our cases? For instance, let us take web shops, because we work mainly on web shops, but not exclusively on web shops. But if we control such a website, we will always scan the website for green claims. We will collect them, list them up, and send them to the trader, because we want to know if the trader has all the necessary proof to back up their claims. So we will ask them to give us that in due time. When we receive an answer, we will, of course, analyze that proof, and we will check if that proof is sufficient for the claims. If it's not the case, well, then there is greenwashing going on. And then we have different options to tackle the greenwashing practices. We can make an official report, send it to the prosecutor in order to get a criminal case, and that can lead to a fine. And the maximum fine for greenwashing practices is €80,000. Another option we have is to make an official report and suggest a transaction. That means that when the company regularizes the situation and pays a certain amount, that the case will be closed. And then a third option that we have is to make a warning and send it to the company with the request to regularize the situation in due time. And up until now, we only worked with those warnings. Why do we do that? Because that is the fastest way to make sure that infractions are regularized. And we have to say, up until now, the companies were very, they worked with us and they regularized the situation each time. So there was no need to put another sanction in place. So that was all what I wanted to say. If there are questions, then we are happy to hear them.
Thank you, Davie. That was a very interesting and very concrete. So you can stop sharing your screen. Thank you. For you, Davie, so you can prepare. Maybe I put those questions for you in your personal chat, so you can prepare them and cite it for the rest. So I think we have almost half an hour for questions. So I think that is the perfect timing for the questions we had. So maybe first to Sophie, I had a question about the timing that was on your slide 8 about the discarding of unsold goods. So I don't know, maybe you mentioned it, but it wasn't clear for everyone. So Sarah and Yasmin wanted to know the 2024, is that really the deadline for this public disclosure? So
okay, no, and actually my answer relates to all the dates that I've put on my slides, and that's the indicative timing when the Commission will launch an initiative, whether it's a legislative proposal or something else. So with or whether it will adopt delegated acts or something like that. What happens now? So the eco design regulation, it's a regulation that means that it doesn't need implementation in national law, but it will apply in all EU member states. But what the Commission did is now it launched a proposal, including what it said about this transparency obligation regarding unsold goods and what happens with them. Now the European Council, so all the member states will work on their common position regarding this proposal. The European Parliament will do the same. And then the Commission, Parliament and the Council will further discuss to finally come to a final proposal in which then also the dates for all these things will become clear. These negotiations, they take up quite some time, so up to 2 years, for example, more or less. So it will take some time before this transparency obligation will be in place. And then regarding really the ban, that still needs to be decided whether there will be a ban and as of which date. So that is regarding the timing, but that's also for the other things I mentioned. The timings I mentioned is really when the Commission will propose something, and then all the processes start.
Okay, thank you, Sophie. Good to know this for ahead. So, but don't wait for these timings to take action in your company. The second question was if Belgium is investigating EPR. Sophie, I think you can tell more about that.
In Belgium, waste management is a competence of the regional governments. And regarding EPR, not only for textiles, but also other waste streams, there is a collaboration between the different regions in which they also set priorities on, for which waste streams, EPR schemes will be considered in the future. Textiles will be considered. We are still in the exploratory phase, so a study is going on and so forth. So it's not that it will be there tomorrow, but it's definitely something that we are considering. So Flanders, Wallonia, and the Brussels capital region together.
Thank you, Sophie. And then the last question for now, maybe there can more. Nina Maat wanted to know if producers can play with terms like durable, repairable. Are there more specific obligations? The same for recycled content. Is there a minimum that the Commission will set?
Yeah. So a couple of things to that. The idea is to avoid that in the future you will be able to play with these terms. Like the idea is to ensure harmonization throughout the EU. That's also why the Commission chose for a regulation. So the eco-design, before it was the eco-design directive, and then you had, every member state had a bit of freedom of how to implement that in national legislation. Now it will be a regulation, or at least that's what the Commission proposes, so to have maximum harmonization. So it's not something that you will be able to play with much. And I think that's also the clarity that the Commission wants to ensure for the entire EU markets, so as to create a level playing field and also to make it easier for all companies to comply, because if everyone has to comply in the same way, it's easier. But what it will mean and what the requirements will be, this is something that will be decided in the future. So it's not right now. What is on the table is more the horizontal framework, and then the very specific requirements, they will be proposed in a later stage. Also regarding, for example, recycled content. And as this is mentioned in the question for recycled content, I think also the exercise about setting targets for reuse or preparing for reuse and for recycling will be very important, because the Commission wants to take measures to promote the waste hierarchy. And so first is you have prevention, and then reuse and repair, and only then recycling. And so it also wants to avoid, by setting recycled content requirements, that something that is reusable would go to recycling. So this will be a rather difficult exercise, how to use the different instruments available and to avoid that you create something that you don't want to create. Thank you.
Okay, then I'll take over. For now, we have some questions for Berenice. Berenice, I hope you're still there. Can you turn on your camera? Great, okay. First, we have a question by Mathilde. She asks, well, it's quite specific, and maybe Sophie already answered this, but I was doing some technical stuff at that moment. It's about the timing also. So the eco-design requirements, will they be communicated in 2024, or will the companies need to comply by 2024?
No, so it's indeed, so now the negotiations will start on the horizontal framework, which is the eco-design regulation. Once we agree on that, the Commission proposes to work with delegated acts in which it will define more specific the requirements, and that the estimated timing for that is 2024, but then it will also be clear as of which point in time the companies will have to comply. So it will not be 2024, but then it will be on the table what the proposal is.
Okay, okay, great. Then I have one also for Berenice, I think, which it's from Nikki de Schrijver. Which data sets does the European Union consider reliable to make the product environmental footprints? Because there's a lot of discussions on the data sets and how they lack peer reviewing. So could you give your idea on that, Berenice?
Yeah, So indeed, I will talk under the control of Sophie. So Sophie, don't hesitate to complete. But regarding this question, indeed, personally, I don't have the information, so I don't know.
I might step in a little bit, even though I'm not the person following up on PEF, but it's not something that the Commission is looking at it on its own. So it's, for example, the Sustainable Apparel Coalition is involved in this, and so it's a set of stakeholders, member states, European Commission, and so on, who is doing this exercise, and so with the idea to come up with a good data set. If you want more information on that, there's a website of the European Commission on product environmental footprint, so then you can have a look there.
Okay, sorry, I was just checking my other questions. Another question from Sarah, thank you. Well, it's quite long. Mandatory recycled content is very interesting, of course. However, what will the European Union do to avoid tampering with recycled content? Not just clothes which do not have recycled content. I hope they will definitely have means to do that, but also virgin material that is recycled immediately to meet the requirements.
Yeah, so regarding mandatory recycled content, okay, so for the time being, we only have the EU strategy and the framework, but I imagine Commission will have to develop way of checking the what will be stated or what will be said by the company, but it still has to be developed right now. Now, Sophie, maybe you want to add something?
Yeah, just a short addition, but it's actually what I said before. I think it will be an important exercise for the Commission to have a look at, you know, what kind of recycled content requirements will you set, knowing that you also want to promote reuse. Well, in the first instance, you want to invest in prevention and you want to promote reuse and then recycling. And there's also the idea that the Commission would like to promote more higher valorization when possible. So not only the recycling technologies that are used today. So I think it will be a very complex exercise to determine what requirements will be set, so as to stimulate each and every step of the waste hierarchy in the right order. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we can go over to the questions for David and then Evelyn.
Sorry, I was looking to unmute myself. Thank you, Simon. I saw Davie was already answering a lot of questions in the chat himself. I don't know, Davie, afterwards, if you want to share some of your answers because we can't see them. If you think they're relevant, then please share them. But there were still some questions left for you. The first was from Krista Gerams. As a brand, we are confused about what eco-labels to use. So what about naming? What naming can we use for raw materials? For example, is the use of the words bio or organic regulated? So I don't know if you have an answer on that.
Mm-hmm. Well, as a government institution, of course, we cannot make advertising on which eco-label is a good label or which is not as good, and you should use this label. But regarding the name of raw materials, bio or organic, for us as an inspector, we look that consumer rights are protected and that the consumer is well informed. So if a consumer for a certain product knows that bio or organic means the same, and that it is indeed bio and / organic, then it is okay for us. What we are concerned about is that sometimes products are displayed as being organic, and it is not the case, or it is not fully organic. Only a percentage is organic. We see that sometimes. So it is very much needed that the information is precise and complete. So I think that is a bit what I can say about that. Yes, but there's also another question as well about the eco labels, because as a consumer, I myself don't know what every label means. It is by investigating these cases that I learn a lot about what some labels do. But for a general consumer, he does not know what it means. So it is essential that you give information, but it is, I have to admit, it is sometimes a difficult exercise to determine what information should I give, because labels have so much information sometimes on their websites, and it is not the intention that a consumer gets drowned by all the information and doesn't know anymore what the useful information is. So it is a bit of a challenge for companies and brands. I know that to find the clear information or the main criteria that is applicable for the label that should at least be communicated to the consumer.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Davie. I hope it becomes clear that we can trust everyone. Another question from Nikki, very active in the Q&A. Davie, you mentioned that they expect brands to explain the label hanging on their clothing. So she was wondering what the brands having these BCI cotton labels then should state on those. So to get an example of how far you really go in your research.
Mm-hmm. Well, our research is limited in the way that we check the information that the trader gives. So we are not going to investigate the label itself. We don't have the competence to do that, or the knowledge or the expertise to do that. And how far should they explain the Better Cotton Initiative cotton label? Well, at least what it checks and what it maybe doesn't check, because for that label in particular, there are some, well, there is a lot of criticism about it as well, that it is a very limited label when it comes to sustainability. So it should be clear for consumers the main characteristics of that label. But not to go so far as to give all the information about that label that is maybe not that useful for the consumer. So you should have the mind of a consumer in mind when you give information about sustainability or about environmental impact, also when it comes to labels.
Okay, thank you, Davie. I don't know about the other questions you already answered in chat, if there are some relevant questions for the rest of the audience, or
I have to think where were the questions exactly, because
there was like from Michel Hublet, for example, do you also work with the companies and advise them, or which brands have you audited? I don't know if this is
yeah, we cannot publicly announce which companies that we are investigating, because that is confidential, and we are bound to our obligation to not disclose that information. About guiding the company. So our role as an inspector is to inspect and to see if there is a violation of the law, and to make sure that it is regulated. It is not our duty to really help or to really guide the companies to say you should put this claim on your website or that claim. That is not what we can do. We can make suggestions and help to companies to comply after we have done our investigation, but it is not possible, for instance, that every company comes to us and asks, can we do this in our marketing campaign? That is impossible. We are a very limited crew at our services, so we cannot check every claim beforehand in order to say this is a go or this is a no-go.
Okay. Berenice, I don't know if you saw the question of Sophie Morkens, or you want me to read it out loud? about I will read it out loud. So her question is if the eco-design strategy, as shown in your presentation, can provoke greenwashing. Like some studies, they say it's not always more sustainable to use recycled fibers content into the product. So, for example, the case if the use of recycled content lowers the quality of the product, and when the recycled content is intentionally made, like for the PET bottles case. So will this be taken into account in the product passport is our question.
Yeah, so I think indeed the Commission will develop the passport, and I think yes, they will take into account this. Normally, they will make impact assessment, and they should also have a look at the life cycle analysis. So I believe and I hope they will take this into account.
Okay, thank you, Berenice. I was thinking of ending up here the questions. I think, Simon, did you?
Sure, yes. Maybe one last one for all the speakers. It's one of me. I'm a bit curious. What's your opinion on the new strategy? How would you assess it? Do you think it will cut wood, or is it going too far? Maybe even, I don't know. Maybe we can let all speakers give their opinion. Sophie, will you start?
Okay. It will be my personal opinion because we don't have a Belgian official opinion yet. So please take that into account because this is also being recorded. Okay. But in my personal view, there's in the strategy several elements that I think also several member states and stakeholders have asked for. I think also when you look at responses from a variety of stakeholders, they're quite positive about the strategy. Of course, it's at this point in time, it's only an action plan, and I think the big discussions will be there once there's legislative proposals on the table, and when it becomes very concrete of what will be also regarding the eco-design regulation, what will be the concrete performance requirements and so on. I think then we will have the biggest discussions. Maybe one thing that is a bit missing or has less attention in this strategy is the prevention part. Like it looks like a strategy that will help to make more sustainable choices and have available more sustainable clothing, but it's not very much or not as much as in other cases addressing are we consuming too much, and what will we consume differently, and how will we do that? If you compare that to food waste, for example, this is a waste stream where very clearly there's a lot of awareness raising about buy only those things you can actually eat. And this is something that it's not only for textiles, it's also for other streams. This question is not so much upfront right now, and the focus is a lot on how to make, which is very good, of course, how to make the products more sustainable. It's a very important step, and it's good that we can take that at EU level. But regarding consumption, I think and prevention, there's still a lot to do.
Very good remarks, I think. Sophie, thank you very much. Berenice, do you have the same view, or?
Yes, I have the same view as Sophie. So I think this EU strategy for sustainable textile is really something good, and that it is needed. And yes, as Sophie said, it's really my personal opinion. Okay. Yeah. So I think it's really good. But now there is really a lot of work to do. So, okay, I am waiting to see what will be really done and what will really change. And maybe I would have liked it focus a little bit more on social rights and on ethics. I have the impression that, okay, it is in the strategy, but okay, not maybe as much as I I would have liked. And I completely agree with Sophie that sustainable products or recycling, it's really nice, but we have to really ask questions about our way of consuming. And I think the main point is to change our way of consuming and to consume less. Okay, but it's a big debate.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The part about the social rights, I've read that in some places too. Maybe they will add it later. I think that's also a good remark. Davie, can you give us your ideas?
Well, in general, I can only concur what Sophie and Berenice said, as it comes specifically to what the greenwashing is about and the future. I don't really think it will change that much. And I think the European Commission, as regarding to the greenwashing, was not really thinking about the consumer, but more about the enforcement authorities to make it more easy for us to tackle greenwashing practices. Because now, if we want to address greenwashing, in most of the times we have to prove that the decision of the consumer could be influenced by that green claim. And now they're going to explicitly put some greenwashing cases in the legislation where we don't have to prove that anymore. So I think it was more written for us as enforcers more than for consumers.
Okay, thank you very much for that view. It's getting quite late, so we can't take any other questions. I think I can really quick answer Nikki because that's relevant. Can the FOD economy, your workplace, Davie, also find global brands? I think that is the case if they sell in Belgium. That's what you told me before.
Yes. So we are only competent to address Belgian companies, but it is indeed so that when a company from another country sells products in Belgium to a web shop, for instance, that we can address those problems as well. We have on a European level a network that is stated by European law. So it is we are obliged to use that. So if there is a trader in Germany and it commits greenwashing practices here in Belgium, then we can put that in a central system, and the Germans are obliged to really investigate those claims and to act if needed. So indeed, we can.
Okay, sounds fair.
We're not helpless.
Okay. Thank you for pushing that one in.
Mm-hmm.
To finish, we have some two other interesting initiatives that might be interesting for you. So I will paste in the chat our LinkedIn page, Sustainable Fashion and Textiles Belgium, where we gather the most important information. So a lot of the people attending are already a member of this or follow this page, but I want to invite the rest to do this as well. So this makes as a group, and Simon had something to add as well.
Indeed, yes. Well, it is more specific for Flemish companies because this is an event in Dutch. But we at Flanders DC are organizing an expert day in a few weeks on the 28th of June. It will not be on greenwashing or sustainability, but more specific on communication and branding for fashion companies. So since we have a lot of fashion companies here in the room, I wanted to mention that. It's a formula, it's a physical event, and it's more tailored for more experienced companies. But if you would be interested to join us there, you can find all the information on our website, on our agenda on flandersdc.be. Okay, then I think we're done. It's also time, so we're good in time. I want to thank all the speakers very much. I really liked your presentations and all the information that we got. Thank you to all for participating. As I said before, you will receive an email afterwards with the evaluation survey for this webinar. And then if you complete that survey, you will receive the presentations and also the recording of these webinars. And we will also add the links that have been shared in the chat, so you don't lose track of those neither. Thank you very much, everybody. And we wish you a very nice day and hope to see you later.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.